You're listening to The Vault. This is part 2 in a 2-part series on Loyal Lundstrom. If you haven't listened to part 1, I recommend doing that now. It will all make a lot more sense. After marrying in Texas, Loyal and his new 18-year-old bride, Doris, had 5 children together, adding to the 5 Loyal had with his late wife, Helen. They settled down in Cisco, Texas. At the time, it had a population of roughly 4,000 people. It was a small, rural town, quaint and quiet. Loyal and Doris started 2 businesses there, the Cisco Motel and Monument Works, which created gravestones and other stone structures. James Lundstrom, previously known as Loyal Lundstrom Jr., was the second youngest of the couple's 5 children. He was 7 years old at the time of his mother's murder. I'm going to pause here and take you on a little journey into the process of writing this story. I first spoke with James, Doris and Loyal's son, nearly 2 years ago. I was writing a story on his father, and I reached out to him along with other family members. James wanted to talk, so we set up a time and did just that. I record all of my interviews, and I did so with James too, but at the time I recorded our interview, I didn't host this podcast or any other, so I didn't ask for permission for his audio to be used in this format. I haven't had luck getting in touch with him again. He did, however, 2 years ago give permission for his quotes to be used in the print and web version of the story. So rather than use his audio, I'll be summarizing or reading his quotes. Okay, back to the story. James had fond memories of his mother, Doris. He said she was a warm woman who gave selflessly to her family, church, and community. Doris Lundstrom was definitely active. She was a Sunday school teacher, children's church choir director, and president of the PTA. On top of that, she was a hands-on owner and operator of the family businesses. And she had 5 children, ranging from 3 to 10. Doris was kind of amazing. And she was a gifted artist. She didn't just run Monument Works. She created the custom headstones and gravestones. When I spoke with James, he told me that his mother was working on a beautiful gravestone at the time of her death. And that gravestone, that work of art, now sits on her burial plot with her name engraved on the front. Thursday, March 3rd, 1983, started like any other day for the Lundstrom family. Most of the kids went to school, while the youngest stayed with Doris at the hotel she and Loyal managed. But what transpired throughout that day and the next few days rocked the small community of Cisco, Texas. Doris's body was found on Saturday, March 5th, 1983, with a shotgun wound to the abdomen. She was found at the Cisco Motel. An autopsy revealed she had been shot and killed 2 days earlier, on Thursday, March 3rd. On that day, Thursday, March 3rd, Loyal showed up at the home of James Clinton, his pastor, with the couple's 3-year-old child. Loyal told him he had to take his wife to visit her injured brother, and he asked that the pastor look after his youngest and the rest of the children when they got home from school. James Clinton agreed, but something about Loyal's story seemed off, and the pastor shared his concerns with close family and friends. On Saturday, March 5th, after not hearing from the couple for 2 days, the pastor, along with some friends, went to the Cisco Motel, and they discovered Doris's body. James, who I spoke to for this story, and his 3 other siblings were attending school, located just behind the motel, when their mother was shot and killed. When I talked with him, he still remembered the day when he learned his mother was murdered, and the realization that life would never be the same. After the pastor found Doris's body, law enforcement was alerted, and eventually they located Doris's vehicle, her 1982 Chrysler New Yorker, at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. But they didn't know where Loyal was. After more than 2 weeks on the run, he was apprehended after exiting an incoming flight. He was charged with first-degree murder for the death of Doris Lundstrom. The trial for that murder didn't end well for Loyal. His defense attorney argued that Doris simply fainted after Loyal pointed the gun at her. It was an unlikely story and somewhat reminiscent of the one Loyal told decades earlier regarding his first wife, Helen. The jury deliberated for 45 minutes before returning a guilty verdict. Loyal was sentenced to life in prison, and this time, all of his appeal attempts failed. In the wake of his mother's murder, James and his siblings stayed with their grandfather in Texas before eventually moving in with their mother's brother. Her brother, their uncle, was serving active duty in the military, so they moved around a lot, and they finally settled in Osceola, Wisconsin. As James got older, he began questioning what really happened between his parents. He still remembers the day he learned his father was the one who murdered his mother, and he said he was shocked. At that time, it seemed out of character. You might be wondering now if all those who grew close to Loyal knew that he had gotten off the hook for the death of his first wife. The answer is, we don't know for sure. There was obviously no internet back then, so it was somewhat reasonable to assume he was able to relocate to a small, rural Texas town without anyone knowing. But what about Doris's mom and dad? After all, Doris's mother was Loyal's nanny for the first set of 5 children back in Minnesota. Doris's parents, Fred and Bernice, actually relocated from Minnesota to the Texas area to be closer to their daughter and her young family. Considering they lived in Minnesota during the time of Loyal's manslaughter trial for the death of Helen, James wonders, suspects even, that his grandparents followed his mom to Texas to keep an eye on her and to keep an eye on Loyal. Fred died in 2002. James said he never did ask his grandfather why he moved to Texas, or if and what he knew about his dad's past. Loyal Lundstrom died in prison on May 1st, 2007. He was 77 years old. Months before his death, James traveled to Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas, with 2 older sisters. He went with a mission: to find out what happened on March 3rd, 1983, and why. He didn't find the answers he was looking for. His father was dying from complications associated with Alzheimer's disease and wasn't capable of explaining. The answers to the questions, held by so many who knew Loyal, went unanswered. To read the full version of this story and more, head to inforum.com/The Vault. This episode was written and produced by me, Trisha Taurinskas. The Vault's editor is Jeremy Fugelberg. If you like what you hear on The Vault, do us a favor and give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening.